time and place here in Martagram. Today we're celebrating the anniversary of the appearance day of Lord Nityananda. For those of you who don't know, on our altar we have at the extreme left is Lord Nityananda Prabhu, and he is considered to be the reincarnation of Lord Balaram, who is Krishna's elder brother. Krishna, of course, is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and he has, he's expanded himself in order to enjoy various pastimes and to deliver us all in various ways. So Krishna's first expansion is Lord Balaram. That's going to be on the text children. Krishna's first expansion is Lord Balaram. And Balaram is considered to be, well, of course, in the Leela, he's Krishna's elder brother, and that makes him Guru. Anyone who's elder, he's considered to be Guru. So Balaram is the original Guru, and when Balaram incarnates in any form that Balaram incarnates, then he also performs that function to some degree. He is guiding the rest of us in devotional service. Lord Balaram is imbued with the mood of service to Krishna, in a slightly protective mode, but also in friendly mood. And Lord Balaram is Krishna's first expansion and the most important expansion, because from Lord Balaram, all other forms of the Lord, they will come. God is expanding in infinite forms, Advaitam Achyutam Anadim Anantarupam, infinite forms that are non-different from himself, but the first of those is Balaram. Therefore, Brahma Samhita says, Ramadi Murti Shukalani Amena Tishtannana Avatarma Parot Bhuvaneshu Kinto Krishna Swayam Samabhavat Paramapumanyo Govindam Adi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami. All of the expansions, all the multi-forms of God begin with Rama, in other words, Balaram. And just as you light one lamp you light so many lamps beginning from one lamp, the original lamp is Krishna. So Lord Nityananda is actually a form of Balaram. When Chaitanya Mahaprabhu comes into this world, Krishna comes into this world in the form of Lord Chaitanya, and Lord Balaram comes as Lord Nityananda. In Bengali poetry, Narottam Das Thakur has written, Rajendra Nandan Jay Shashishruta Hailo Shei, Balaram Hailo Nitai. The same thing. So tonight I thought we could read one verse and purport from Srila Prabhupada, maybe a few verses, from the 7th canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam, and hopefully you'll see why this is significant to today's event. So kindly repeat after me. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. This is the Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 7, and Chapter 15, the text is number 45. I'll just chant the Sanskrit myself. Yavan Rikaya Ratham Atma Vishobha Kalpam Dhatte Garishta Charanarchana Yav Nishatam Gnanasim Achyutabalo Astashatro Swananda Tushta Upashanta Idam Vijahyat. And that means that as long as one has to accept a material body with its different parts and paraphernalia, which are not fully under one's control, one must have the lotus feet of his superiors, namely his spiritual master and the spiritual master's predecessors. By their mercy, one can sharpen the sword of knowledge, and with the power of the Supreme Personality of Godhead's mercy, one must then conquer the enemies mentioned above. We need to backtrack a little bit so we know who those enemies are. The previous verse had stated, in the conditioned stage, one's conceptions of life are sometimes polluted by passion and ignorance, which are exhibited by attachment, hostility, greed, lamentation, illusion, fear, madness, false prestige, insults, fault-finding, deception, envy, intolerance, passion, bewilderment, hunger, and sleep. All of these are enemies. Sometimes one's conceptions are also polluted by goodness. You didn't know that, did you? Even the mode of goodness in this material world. In fact, in some ways, it's the most pernicious of the three modes because it looks to be very good for you. And generally, the Shastra encourages us to rise to the mode of goodness. That's a whole topic in itself, so we won't diary on that. But these are all the enemies that we have to conquer over if we're going to be bona fide human beings. They can be categorized broadly as passion and ignorance, but they exhibit themselves by their various symptoms in the form of, as we said, attachment, hostility, fault-finding, deception, hunger, etc., etc. So, by the mercy of one's spiritual masters, one can sharpen the sword of knowledge, and with the power of the Supreme Personality of Godhead's mercy, one must then conquer the enemies mentioned above. In this way, the devotee should be able to merge into his own transcendental bliss, and then he may give up his body and resume his spiritual identity. Now, there's a very long purport here written by Srila Prabhupada, which largely reflects a similarly long commentary given by Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, who lived some 400 or 500, well actually 300 years ago. And I'll maybe summarize because the time is a little bit less. Purport by His Divine Grace, Srila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami, Srila Prabhupada. In the Bhagavad Gita, chapter 4, text 9, the Lord says, Janma karma chane divyam evam yoveti tatvata jaktva deham pudarjanma naiti maneti sorjuna. One who knows the transcendental nature of my appearance and activities does not, upon leaving the body, take his birth again in this material world, but attains my eternal abode, or Arjuna. This is the highest perfection of life, and the human body is meant for this purpose. It is said in the Srimad Bhagavatam, 11th canto, chapter 20, text 17. This human form of body is the most valuable boat, and the spiritual master is the captain, Guru Karunadharam, to guide the boat in plying across the ocean of nescience. An ocean of nescience. We have many times in the Shastras and in Krishna consciousness, we often hear the ocean. Various things are compared to the ocean. Living so close to the Pacific Ocean, we have some sense of what this means. You cannot imagine how many gallons of water are in that ocean a couple of miles to the west of us. So we, however, live in an ocean of nescience. Somehow or other we have to negotiate gallons and gallons, tons of nescience in order to go back home, back to Godhead, which is the perfection of the human form of life. So for that, we require, frankly, all the help we can get. Therefore, it's encouraged that one should at least find one bona fide spiritual master, and in fact, there are many more than that, as we'll see in this purport here. So let's read on. Since the spiritual master is the captain, one must serve the spiritual master very sincerely, so that by his mercy one will be able to get the mercy of the Supreme Lord. Now listen closely, kids. A significant word here is Achyuta Bala. The spiritual master is certainly very merciful to his disciples, and consequently by satisfying him, the devotee gets strength from the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The perfection of knowledge is certainly to become transcendently situated. Here Prabhupada is quoting two verses from Bhagavad Gita about being transcendently situated. One is chapter 18, text 54. Anyone know this verse? Brahma Bhuta. Famous verse. That means that one who is transcendently situated at once realizes the Supreme Brahman and becomes fully joyful. He never laments nor desires to have anything. He's equally disposed to all living entities. Therefore, in that state, he attains pure devotional service. We're talking about the preliminary qualifications for bhakti here. We're in an ocean of nescience, and the preliminary qualifications for receiving bhakti is that we become equal to all living beings. We become freed from lamentation, freed from hankering, and filled with knowledge of spiritual reality. That's not so easy to do, and few of us have done that. There's another verse quoted from the same chapter, well, the next verse, chapter 18, text 55. Bhaktyamam abhijanati yavam yashasvi tattvata tato mam tattvato gnatva vishate sad anantaram. One can understand the Supreme Personality as he is only by devotional service. And when one is in full consciousness of the Supreme Lord by such devotion, he can enter into the kingdom of God. Now, Srila Prabhupada continues his purport. Unless one has attained the stage of devotional service and the mercy of the spiritual master and Krishna, there is a possibility one may fall down and again accept a material body. The word tattvata in the verse previously quoted from chapter 4, in reality, is very important. Unless one understands Krishna in truth by the mercy of the spiritual master, one is not free to give up his material body. Significant in this verse are the words Gnanasim Achyuta Bala. Gnanasim, the sword of knowledge, is given by Krishna. And when one serves the Guru and Krishna in order to hold the sword of Krishna's instructions, Balaram gives one strength. Balaram is Nityananda. Brajendra Nandana Jay Shashisuta Hailo Shai Balaram Hailo Nitai. This Balaram, comes with Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, and both of them are so merciful that in this age of Kali, one may very easily take shelter of their lotus feet. They come especially to deliver the fallen souls of this age. Papi, tapi, jatachilo, hariname, uttarilo. Their weapon is Sankirtana, harinam. Just like we were chanting in ecstasy for a long time. How many names of Nitai and Gauranga did we chant? No one can count. So we counteract the ocean of nescience with the ocean of Harinama Sankirtana. Diving deep into that ocean. Srila Prabhupada said we should become, sometimes it's called, Rupa Goswami in fact calls it Bhakti Rasamrit Sindhu, the ocean of Bhakti Rasa. That is Sankirtana. And Srila Prabhupada said we should become like deep water fish. There are so many aquatics in the ocean, but those fish that live deep under the water, they're safe. The fishies who come up to see what's happening on where the water is warm and salubrious, they're the ones that are spotted by the pelicans. You know, you've seen pelicans, they have a big beak with a pouch in it. That pouch is especially made to capture little fishies who want to see what's happening on the other side. So similarly, we have actually done that. We were a little bit careless and we wanted to check out the warm water of Maya. And here we are. We ended up in Maya, in this material world. And at every step, we're being beaten and kicked and smashed into, well, we don't even learn from it, frankly speaking. We don't really learn our lesson. Although there are lessons to be learned here, we don't learn. Because the nature of Maya is such that you really can't learn. If you're influenced by Maya, her whole purpose is to keep you confused and bewildered and distracted in every way possible. So these things are, again, as Prabhupada has already told us, Rajoguna, or passion, and Tamoguna, or ignorance. Rajoguna means you are distracted, mainly by your desires. That's called passion. The chief of which is sex desire, which makes everything happen in this world. But if you're not even that elevated, then there's the mode of ignorance, which just keeps you bewildered and befuddled and asleep and lazy and just don't care. So these things are influencing us all the time, and for that reason it's very hard to get out of this ocean of nescience. Very, very hard. But if we engage in devotional service to the Lord, under the directions of a bona fide spiritual master, he awards us with the sword of knowledge. And that's being given here. Gnanasi, the sword of knowledge. And by serving the spiritual master, that sword is sharpened. If we don't serve our spiritual masters, if we don't accept the spiritual master and serve him humbly, then the knowledge is not really activated. In the Shvetashvatara Upanishad, literally the last word of that Upanishad, the last verse at least, anybody know what I'm thinking of? It's section 6, number 23. Yasya deve parabhaktir yatha deve tatha gura tasyaite kadatha hiyartha prakashante mahatmana. Unto those very few great souls who have kept equal faith in the spiritual master and Krishna, and who have served their spiritual masters very nicely, to them all the imports of the Shastras are revealed. It's not just a mechanical or an academic exercise. Otherwise, there are so many. I used to work in the University of Washington with so many people who knew Sanskrit and Prakrit and so many Avadramshas and Brajbhasha and other dialects of Hindi, and they know all these things, and they know all about bhakti, and they can quote these books as well as we do. In fact, some of them know these books better than we do, because we don't really take full advantage of these books some of the time. How many people here have read the entire Srimad Bhagavatam? Please raise your hand. Not that many. Some, but not that many. And that's at the Hare Krishna temple. Are you going to find people outside of this place that have read Srimad Bhagavatam? Seems unlikely to me. Anyway, so the thing that really helps you to advance and to learn and to imbibe the lessons that are meant to be imparted by these Shastras is the activity of serving Krishna. Now, in our conditioned state, we can hardly see Krishna. That's why he incarnates in the form of the deity in the temple, for example, because we can only see stone. Therefore, he comes as if in a stone form to receive our service. Similarly, he comes, or he expands himself as his devotee in the form of the spiritual master. He's not God, but he's given all the respect that God has given, because we need every opportunity to render devotional service in a reciprocal fashion. The spiritual master can do that. And by humbly following his orders, or his advice and his instructions and guidance, then we gradually make advancement. We can come and see Krishna every day in the temple, and no matter what nonsense we do, he's going to smile at us. And so then we go home thinking, well, Krishna must be happy because he's smiling. But the spiritual master sometimes will tell you, you're in Maya. You're not chanting properly. You haven't read Srimad Bhagavatam. How many things are you attached to and lamenting about and hankering after? This is Maya. So that is the special mercy of the spiritual master, and the spiritual master therefore is considered to be the representative of both Balaram and Nityananda. And that's why Srila Prabhupada has made this connection. Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur in his commentary has not said anything about this. Only Srila Prabhupada mentions this. And we're not done yet. Let's go on to hear what else Srila Prabhupada says here. Balaram is Nityananda. Now, we quoted already. Papi tapi tatachilo harinam uddharilo. Their weapon is harinam sankirtana. Thus one should accept the sword of knowledge from Krishna and be strong with the mercy of Balaram. We are therefore worshipping Krishna Balaram in Vrindavana. Jai! Shishi Gauritai ki! Srila Prabhupada ki! In the Mundaka Upanishad 3-4 it is said, Nayam Atma Balahine Nalabhyo Nacha Pramada Tapaso Bhakyalingat Etayo Rupayer Hitate Yastu Vidvans Dasyaisha Atma Vishate Brahmadhama. Slightly different version of the verse than we've heard in other places. One cannot attain the goal of life without the mercy of Balaram. Sri Narottam Das Thakur therefore says, Nitayer Karuna Have Broje Radha Krishna Pade. When one receives the mercy of Balaram, Nityananda, one can attain the lotus feet of Radha Krishna very easily. Shesham Mantanahi Jar, Pratha Janma Gelautar, Vidya Kude Ki Kori Vitar. If one has no connection with Nitai, Balaram, then even though one is a very learned scholar or jnani, or has taken birth in a very respectable family, these assets will not help him. We must therefore conquer the enemies of Krishna consciousness with the strength received from Balaram. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. That's the end of his purport there. Now, for those of you who are very eager, I will just make it, you can take a note here, that because this word Bala appears in the verse here, Srila Prabhupada, for the next few purports that he's commenting on these verses that are otherwise apparently unrelated to Nityananda or Balaram, Srila Prabhupada continues to mention, and not only mention, but to focus on this same theme. For example, let's just skip ahead and go to Srila Prabhupada's translation of the following verse, which is not entirely literal. He says, quote, otherwise, if one does not take shelter of Achyuta and Baladev, then the senses, acting as the horses, and the intelligence, acting as the driver, both being prone to material contamination, inattentively bring the body which acts as the chariot to the path of sense gratification. Everybody got that? If we're not very careful, then the mind, the intelligence and the senses, they will inadvertently or inattentively bring us back to sense gratification. The default is that we tend towards Vishaya. Vishaya Bhogavilas means sense gratification, sensual pursuits, material creature comforts, as we say in modern language. This is what the mind will do. This is what the senses will certainly do. Senses don't even think. At least the mind thinks a little bit, but the senses don't even think. So unfortunately, because we're conditioned, we're habituated in so many bad habits, the natural course of the senses and the mind and the intelligence being as contaminated as they are is to take us down. Now, another way to look at that is from the bottom looking up. And then we have to consider, well, if the senses are by nature going to pull us down, then that means that we somehow or other have to go against the grain to bring ourselves up. We have to swim upstream, as it were. The flow is going down. We have to swim upstream, and therefore this connection is being made here. Jnana, Achyuta, Jnanasi Bala. Achyuta Bala. The strength is required. Not material strength. It doesn't matter how many days consecutively you practice at the 24-hour fitness center. Here we need spiritual strength. That comes through divine grace, especially through the divine grace of the spiritual master. So the body is like a chariot. In the old days they used to have chariots. Now we have cars. But the body itself is like the chariot. The driver is like the intelligence. And the senses are like the horses. If the intelligence, and the mind is like the reins. If the intelligence is not just doesn't have a firm grasp on the reins, which means the mind, and the mind is therefore not tugging on each horse as is appropriate to steer it where we want to go, then that means that the horses are in charge and we're going where they lead us. That means the senses are dictating where we're going. Nunam pramatta kurate karmaya indriya pritaya apranoti. And therefore in the Bhagavatam it said that a person who considers the self to be the body, or to be the body to be the self, the person in this bodily misconception of life, he has to perform sinful activities because he's dedicated to that goal. I must attain my creature comforts. And even if austerity measures, as they're calling it now in Europe, are imposed upon the citizens, they freak out. And we have a situation where crime is so rampant and exploitation is so rampant. For those who live in India, you know, There's so much concern about corruption, that's what it's all about. Also, people are cheating by hook or crook to get whatever they want, whatever they feel they need, because of this ignorance, bodily concept of life. Again, this is the effect of living in the ocean of nescience. So nunam pramatta kurate vikarma yad indriya pritaya apranoti nasathu manye yata atmanoya asannape kleshada asadeha. But Rishabhadev tells us, I don't think it's very smart to engage perpetually in activities that result in another material body. As long as we're engaged in fruitive activity of any sort, we're going to get either pious or usually sinful reactions. And if a person is not hesitant to do any sinful thing to the degree that he's in this bodily concept of life, he can hardly prevent himself he can hardly control his senses or his mind. Therefore, we have a responsibility. We have to, those of us who know about these things, who have heard, and who are cultivating, to whatever degree, we're cultivating Krishna consciousness, we have the responsibility to share this knowledge with others. Because they need it, and there are people hungering for this knowledge. They're hankering for it. But they don't know where to turn. People know that the world is in a sorry state. They can identify what those problems are, but they don't understand why, because they're missing this crucial realization, Brahma-bhuta Jnana. They're missing it. So Srila Prabhupada, representing the very merciful nature of Lord Nityananda in particular, Lord Nityananda is considered to be even more merciful than Lord Chaitanya. And during his manifest leelas in West Bengal some 500 years ago, and the whole eastern half of India actually, his characteristic was that he would go to all classes of human beings and share Krishna consciousness with them without any caste distinction. And he didn't care that much for social conventions. In those days, especially in West Bengal, there was very much the Smarta Brahmin conception of life that was very prominent and respected in society, and anybody who didn't toe that line could expect to be ostracized. And in fact, that's what happened to Rupa Goswami and Sanatana Goswami. They were previously born in Gauda Saraswat Brahmin families, but because they were induced into the service of the Muslim governor, Nawab Hussain Shah, therefore they lost their caste. But Nityananda didn't care for this. Achandale Denan Hidayadayamai. Nityananda was so merciful that he would even go to the Chandalas and give them Krishna consciousness. What does Chandala mean? The very lowest of human beings that you can imagine. It's all relative, of course, high and low. In this world, every truth is relative. But he would go to the lowest members of his society and he would give them Krishna consciousness without hesitation, very mercifully. So therefore, if we want to gain the mercy of Lord Chaitanya, then we need to get the mercy of Lord Nityananda. And on this day we can do so by praying very carefully that we can imbibe his mood. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is the combined form of Sri Sri Radha Krishna. Only through his agency in this age of Kali Yuga can we actually enter into the leelas of Radha Krishna or realize who is Radha Krishna. But in order to get the mercy of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, we require to get the blessings of Lord Nityananda, and he's so kind that even though we don't deserve anything, he's giving us everything. How many of us are really solidly situated in what is considered in our Shastras, in our own Shastras, to be the ideal behavior of a civilized human being, not to speak of a Vaishnava? Very few of us. But because Lord Nityananda is merciful, he's giving without any consideration of our disqualifications or our qualifications. Either one of them means nothing to him. It's pure mercy, pure kindness, and it's free. Once I was hearing from Hari Shari Prabhu, older godbrother, who was Prabhupada's servant in 1976. So he was on a morning walk in, I think it was in Mayapur, maybe Kolkata, and somebody asked Srila Prabhupada, what is Kripa Siddha? perfection through causeless mercy? I think it was Guru Das actually asked this question. So Prabhupada turned around, came very close, and poked him, jabbed him in the stomach pretty hard, and said, Kripa Siddha means, I'm giving this to you. Take it. It's free. Still we don't take. This is the foolishness. As we find in the Mahabharata, of all people who said it, Duryodhana. What did he say? Janami dharmam nachame pravritti. I know what is dharma, but I do not incline. Janami adharmam nachame nivritti. And I know what is adharma, and yet I just can't. This is our unfortunate condition. Nitai is coming. Nityananda Dayamaya is giving us freely the highest, the quintessence of all spiritual attainment in the form of Krishna Prema. Free for the taking, no conditions, no expectations, absolutely no strings attached. Free. You just have to accept it. And we're so asleep with ignorance, and we're so distracted with passion that we don't even notice. So on this day at least, we can take shelter of Lord Nityananda, pray very hard for his blessings, and as I said earlier, to imbibe his mood by sharing Krishna consciousness. This is especially the responsibility of those who are born in India, because you have a natural advantage. Sometimes when we go to college, if we didn't study our language requirements, for example, in high school, what do you have to do before you can take a French course or any foreign language course? What do you have to do? You have to remove your deficiency. Right? So this is what we're having to do. And when we become in these lower modes of nature and take birth in the one like I did, then we're automatically at a disadvantage. But Bharata Bhumite Vailo Manusha Janmajar Janma Shartha Kori Korapar Prakar. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu gives this instruction. Anyone who has taken birth in India, he has the obligation to, first of all, Janma Sartha Kori. Make your own life, become Krishna conscious yourself. Make your own life perfect, and then Parapakar. Do some real service for the rest of the world. And what is that service? What is that Parapakar that we can do for others? Who knows? We can perform Sankirtana, we can distribute books, we can share Krishna consciousness in any way necessary. Srila Prabhupada especially emphasized book distribution. Jare dekhe tare kaho Krishna upadesh amar jnana guru hai tare desh. Deliver everyone in sight. Give everyone that you see some degree of Krishna consciousness. Sometimes you can't give them too much, but at least by giving them your example, then they see, and they become interested. Because after all, example is better than precept. So this is the thing we can pray for today. This is the thing that's really valuable, because you have this short life. Our acharyas commenting on this verse, they point out that this body is not going to last very long, but while it does last, there's something which is super excellently valuable, and that is that we have this opportunity that is given by Nityananda here to take to Sri Radha Krishna's Bhakti via the agency of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and all of his representatives. That comes down through Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, and today we're worshiping Nityananda, who represents him as the Guru. Just like we say, Shri Shri Guru Gauranga. So who is Guru? That's Nityananda. And of course, Nityananda himself, also we approach him through the agency of our immediate Gurus, Srila Prabhupada, and those who are representing him nicely. So they can give us this blessing, but you have to ask for it. If you just ask, they already give it out free. But we have to beg for it. If we do so, then we can make our life perfect very shortly. Thank you very much. All glory to Srila Prabhupada.
சக்கரை பொங்கலுக்கு ஏலக்காய் பிடிக்கிறாமா அவ There.